They told you it was about the budget. They told you it was just another stalemate. Just another game of chicken where the government shuts down for a few days, the cameras roll, and eventually, everyone shakes hands and goes home. But they lied. Because while the cameras were focused on the shutdown, on the national parks closing, and the breathless countdown clocks on the news, something else was happening in the dark. A move so quiet, yet so massive, that by the time most people realize it happened, the rules of the game will have completely changed. Senate Democrats didn't just float a budget proposal. They didn't just ask for money. They floated a fundamental rewrite of the Department of Homeland Security. We are talking about new limits on warrants. We are talking about a total overhaul of immigration enforcement. And they are using the chaos of a shutdown to do it. If you think this is just about politics, you're missing the point. This isn't about left versus right anymore. This is about the machinery of power. It's about who gets to decide who enters this country, and more importantly, who has the power to stop them. You see, Washington runs on a very simple principle: never let a good crisis go to waste. And right now, we are staring down the barrel of a crisis that has been manufactured to force a hand. Most people have no idea what's about to happen after these changes go through. But you need to know. Because once this door is opened, it doesn't close. By the time you finish this video, you won't just understand the headline. You're going to understand the playbook. You're going to see the trap that was set weeks ago. And you're going to see exactly why the stalemate isn't the problem. It's the distraction. But before we start, subscribe and leave your like. And comment where you're watching from. Now let's go back. We're going deep. To understand this moment, you have to stop thinking like a voter and start thinking like an operative. In D.C., there are two types of bills. There are the show ponies, the ones they talk about on the Sunday talk shows. These are designed to make you feel good or make you angry. They are theater. Then, there are the submarines. The submarines are the riders, the amendments, and the condition clauses attached to must pass legislation. A government funding bill is the ultimate must pass legislation. If it fails, the lights go out. Soldiers don't get paid. The machine stops. So what do you do if you want to pass a policy that is controversial? A policy that limits how ICE can operate? A policy that changes the legal requirements for warrants at the border? Do you introduce a standalone bill and debate it in the daylight? No. You wait for the submarine. Here is the reality of the stalemate. Senate Democrats have put forward a proposal that ties DHS funding to policy changes. Specifically, they are looking to restrict the use of warrants and alter detention capabilities. On the surface, they say this is about civil liberties. They say the Department of Homeland Security has become a bloated monster that needs a leash. And let's be honest, is there truth to that? Absolutely. We'll get to the history of the DHS in a minute. But look at the timing. They aren't debating this in the Judiciary Committee. They are holding the DHS budget hostage to get it done. This is leverage. The narrative you're hearing on TV is, Republicans want a shutdown, or Democrats want open borders. But that's the cartoon version. The real version is a high-stakes negotiation about the legal framework of national sovereignty. When you strip away the noise, the question they are really fighting over is this: does the executive branch, the president's agencies, have too much power? Or, if you restrict that power, do you effectively dissolve the border? It's a trap. If Republicans say no, they are blamed for the shutdown. If they say yes, they agree to hamstring the very agencies they claim to champion. It's a master stroke of political maneuvering. But for you and me, it's a moment of extreme danger. Because when titans fight, it's the villagers who get stepped on. To really grasp the magnitude of these proposed changes, we have to rewind. We have to look at the pattern. It's 2002. The dust is still settling from 9/11. The country is terrified. The accepted truth at the time was simple: we need safety at any cost. So, Washington created the Department of Homeland Security. It was the largest reorganization of the federal government since World War II. It absorbed 22 different agencies: ICE, CBP, FEMA, the Secret Service, all put under one massive umbrella. The mandate was clear: never again. But here is the thing about government agencies. They are like gas. They expand to fill whatever space you give them. Over the last 20 years, the DHS has transformed. It went from a counterterrorism unit to a massive domestic policing force. We've seen the rise of warrantless searches in the Constitution-free zone, that 100-mile strip around the U.S. border where 2/3 of the American population lives. Did you know that? If you live within 100 miles of a border or a coast, the Fourth Amendment doesn't apply to you in the same way it does in Kansas. For years, Democrats and libertarians alike have been screaming about this. They warned that we were building a surveillance state. They warned that emergency powers would become permanent habits. And they were right. But then, something shifted. The border crisis exploded. It became the single biggest political liability for the current administration. You saw the numbers. Record crossings. Cities like New York and Chicago buckling under the strain. So why now? Why, in the middle of a historic border crisis, would Senate Democrats float a plan to limit the enforcement powers of the DHS? Logic suggests you would want more enforcement during a crisis. Right? If your house is flooding, you don't fire the plumber. This is where the plot thickens. This is the reversal. The Democrats aren't just trying to limit DHS because of civil rights, though that's the banner they wave. They are doing it because the system is breaking, and they are trying to change the rules of engagement before the whole thing collapses. They know the current enforcement model isn't working for their base, and it's not working for the border. So, they are trying to pivot. They want to shift the focus from detain and deport to process and release, with a lighter legal footprint. But to do that, they have to break the legal tools ICE uses. They have to change the warrant requirements. And that brings us to the specifics. The devil is in the details. And these details? They are terrifying. Let's get tactical. What exactly are Senate Democrats floating? They aren't just asking for budget cuts. They are asking for procedural handcuffs. First, the warrants. Currently, immigration enforcement officers have broad authority to enter private lands, not dwellings, but lands, within 25 miles of the border without a warrant. They can set up checkpoints. They can search vehicles if they have reasonable suspicion. The new proposal seeks to curb this. They want to require higher standards of probable cause. They want to limit the expedited removal process. That's the fast-track deportation tool used for people caught right at the line. On paper, this sounds like protecting the Constitution. Who doesn't love a good warrant, right? It's the American way. But ask a Border Patrol agent what this looks like in practice. Imagine you are an agent. It's 2 a.m. You're tracking a group that just crossed. They scatter onto a private ranch. Under the current rules you pursue, you do your job. Under the proposed changes, that pursuit could become a legal minefield. If you don't have the specific warrant for that specific property or that specific individual, do you stop? Do you call a judge at 2 a.m. while the group disappears into the interior? This is the friction point. The Democrats are arguing that the current system violates human rights. They argue that DHS has been operating like a paramilitary force with zero accountability. And they have examples, cases where citizens were harassed, where due process was ignored. These are real stories. But the opposition, the Republicans and the border hawks, see this differently. They see this as defunding the police. They argue that if you require a warrant for every move in a dynamic border environment, you are essentially legalizing evasion. You are telling the cartels, as long as you make it to private property, you're safe until the paperwork comes through. And we all know how fast government paperwork moves. Then, there's the second change, detention limits. The proposal floats capping the number of detention beds DHS is funded for. This is a subtle, bureaucratic way to force policy. If Congress only pays for 30,000 beds, but 50,000 people cross in a week, what happens to the extra 20,000? They cannot be detained. It's physically and legally impossible. So, by default, they must be released. Do you see the play? They don't have to pass a law that says, open borders. That would be political suicide. Instead, they pass a budget that makes detention impossible. They starve the beast until it lets go. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's math. If you reduce the capacity of the jails, you increase the rate of release. It is a backdoor way to implement a policy that the American public has repeatedly said they are skeptical of. And this is happening while the government is threatening to shut down. They are saying, accept these caps, accept these limits, or the government closes. It is the ultimate game of chicken. And you are the one sitting in the passenger seat. So why has this led to a stalemate? Why hasn't one side blinked? Because for the Republicans, this is the hill to die on. The base is furious about the border. If they cave on DHS authority now, they lose their biggest card in the upcoming election. For the Democrats, specifically the progressive wing driving this is a moral imperative. They view the DHS as a rogue agency. They view the detention centers as inhumane. They are under immense pressure from their activists to abolish IC, or at least break its knees. And caught in the middle? The funding. The shutdown is the leverage point. But let's zoom out. This isn't just about 2024. This is about the future of the American state. If the Democrats succeed here, they set a precedent. You can use the budget process to rewrite the Fourth Amendment's application at the border. If they fail, the Republicans solidify the DHS as a permanent, untouchable security apparatus that can operate outside standard policing norms. There is no middle ground anymore. The center has collapsed. But here is the part that nobody is talking about. The part that keeps the insiders awake at night. What happens if the changes go through, and they backfire? We've seen this movie before. Remember bail reform? The idea was noble. Stop keeping poor people in jail just because they can't pay. But the implementation was flawed, and in many cities, it led to a revolving door of repeat offenders. The public backlash was swift and brutal. Now, imagine that on a national scale with national security. If these warrant limits are enacted, and a terror suspect slips through because an agent was waiting on a judge, the political fallout won't just hurt the Democrats. It will shatter the public's trust in the entire system. On the flip side, if we continue down the path of a militarized border where rights don't matter, do we wake up 10 years from now in a country we don't recognize? A country where, "Show me your papers," is a standard greeting at every state line? This is the tension. This is the wire we are walking. And right now, the Senate is holding the scissors. I promised you a payoff. I told you that by the time you watched this, you'd see the trap. Here it is. You think this is about immigrants crossing a river in Texas? You think this is about laborers looking for work? That's the surface story. That's the story for the newspapers. The real story is about surveillance and control. The changes Senate Democrats are floating regarding warrants don't just apply to physical searches. They apply to digital ones. They apply to how DHS collects data. In the modern world, the border isn't a wall. It's a database. It's biometric scanning. It's facial recognition. If they limit the physical warrants, does that mean they are limiting the digital ones? Or, and here is the scary thought, are they trading physical enforcement for digital surveillance? Think about it. We won't raid your house, but we will track your phone. We won't detain you, but we will tag you. Is this proposal actually a pivot toward a total surveillance state, disguised as a civil liberties victory? It sounds crazy until you look at the budget allocation. While they are fighting over detention beds, look at where the money is going. Technology, AI, monitoring systems. They are building a digital wall. And a digital wall doesn't just stop at the Rio Grande. It can extend to every airport, every train station, every internet connection in America. So when Senate Democrats say they want to change DHS, you have to ask, change it into what? This stalemate isn't a pause. It's a pivot point. We are watching the death of the old DHS, the post-9/11 DHS based on boots on the ground. And we are watching the birth of something new. Something sleeker, quieter, and potentially much more invasive. But the Republicans aren't buying it. Or maybe, they just want to be the ones to control the switch. And this brings us to the most dangerous part of the story. The reaction. Because while Washington is playing 4D chess with the budget, the situation on the ground is deteriorating fast. The agents are demoralized. The states are taking matters into their own hands. Texas, Florida, Arizona. They aren't waiting for the Senate. They are starting to build their own foreign policy. And that is where the constitutional crisis truly begins. We are standing on the edge of a cliff. If the Senate deadlock continues, if the government shuts down, or if these changes are forced through, the states are going to revolt. We are already seeing it. But here is the inevitable law of physics that Washington forgot. Nature abhors a vacuum. When the federal government steps back, someone else steps in. If the DHS is handcuffed by new warrant requirements, if ICE is defunded to the point where they can't hold detainees, the border doesn't just disappear. The responsibility just shifts. It shifts to the states. We are witnessing something that hasn't happened since the 1860s. We are seeing a soft secession of authority. Governors are looking at the chaos in the Senate. They are reading these proposals to limit DHS, and they are saying, "Fine. If you won't do it, we will." Texas has already seized public parks on the border. They've installed their own razor wire. They are arresting migrants on state trespassing charges because the federal charges aren't being applied. But here is where the DHS changes. We talked about in Part 1 become the match that lights the powder keg. If these changes pass, if federal agents are legally barred from entering certain areas without a warrant, who fills that void? State troopers. National Guard. And guess what? State troopers don't report to the president. They report to the governor. This creates a split-screen reality. On one channel, you have a federal government trying to manage migration with processing centers and apps. On the other channel, you have state governments running a military-style blockade. Two systems. One country. Operating in direct conflict. This isn't just a policy dispute anymore. This is a turf war. And the turf is American soil. You have to understand the legal argument here because it is the engine driving this entire conflict. The Constitution is a contract. It's a deal. The states agreed to give up some of their power to the federal government. In exchange, the federal government agreed to do a few specific things. One of them is found in Article 4, Section 4. Protect each of them, the states, against invasion. This is the breach of contract theory. The argument gaining steam right now, from governors, attorneys general, and legal scholars, is that by intentionally weakening DHS, by limiting warrants and releasing detainees, the federal government is violating that contract. If Washington passes a budget that makes it impossible to enforce the border, Have they legally abandoned their duty? If you hire a security guard for your building, and he decides to unlock the doors and take a nap, you don't just complain. You fire him. You take over the security yourself. That is the logic the states are using. So, if Senate Democrats get their way, if they manage to slip these DHS limitations into the funding bill, expect the reaction to be instant. We will see states passing their own sovereignty acts. We will see deputized local sheriffs enforcing immigration law, ignoring the federal stand-down orders. And then comes the nightmare scenario. Imagine a federal agent following the new, limited warrant rules, trying to cut a state-owned wire fence to let migrants in for processing. And standing on the other side is a state National Guardsman under orders to stop them. Gun to gun. Badge to badge. It sounds like fiction. It sounds like a movie. But we came within inches of this earlier this year in Eagle Pass. If these new policies go through, we aren't just risking a shutdown. We are risking a kinetic confrontation between state and federal forces. The insiders know this. They are terrified of it. But they are pushing the agenda anyway. Why? Because the goal isn't just about the border. It's about the new normal. Let's zoom out. Way out. Why would a political party float changes that are so obviously unpopular? Polling shows Americans want more border security, not less. Even Democratic mayors in big cities are begging for help. So why float a proposal to handicap the DHS? Because this is a managed decline. The people writing these bills aren't stupid. They are ideological. They believe that the concept of a hard border is obsolete in a global economy. They believe that migration is inevitable, and the only role of government is to manage the flow, not stop it. By shifting the DHS away from enforcement, guns, jails, walls, and toward administration, processing, paperwork, social services, they are fundamentally changing the definition of a nation. A nation has a border. An economic zone just has a port of entry. This stalemate in the Senate is the friction between those two worldviews. The old world believes in sovereignty, citizenship, and the rule of law. The new world believes in global movement, universal rights, and bureaucratic management. When they limit the warrants, they are protecting the new world vision. They are making sure that the tools of the old world, arrests, raids, become too difficult to use. It is a soft revolution. They aren't burning down the DHS headquarters. They are just rewriting the employee handbook so that the building stops functioning. But there is one variable they forgot to account for. Power is a funny thing. We think it's about F-15s and nuclear codes. We think it's about the gavel in the Senate chamber. But real power? Real power is belief. A currency is only valuable because we believe it is. A law is only followed because we believe it's just. And a government only rules because we believe it has the authority to do so. This is called the consent of the governed. And right now, that consent is evaporating. When Senate Democrats float these changes, when they play games with the DHS budget while the country feels like it's in crisis, they are breaking the spell. They are showing you the man behind the curtain. They are showing you that the chaos isn't an accident, it's a policy choice. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. The reason this video exists, the reason you are watching it, and the reason millions of people are waking up, is because the narrative has failed. They told you the border was secure. You saw it wasn't. They told you the DHS needs less power. You felt the danger rising. They told you it's just a budget stalemate. You realized it's a battle for the soul of the country. This is the reversal, I promised you. The more they try to manipulate the system, the more they try to use submarines and riders to pass unpopular agendas, the more they expose their own weakness. A government that truly represents the people doesn't have to hide its policies in a 3,000-page bill at midnight. A government that is confident in its leadership doesn't fear the skepticism of its citizens. It's easy to look at this news, the stalemate, the DHS gutting, the state rebellion, and feel hopeless. It's easy to feel like the machine is too big and you are too small. But that is exactly what they want you to feel. They want you tired. They want you cynical. They want you to check out so they can finalize the changes without any noise. But I want you to look at this differently. This chaos? This friction? This is actually a good sign. It means the immune system of the country is fighting back. If nobody cared, they would have passed these changes years ago. The reason they are stalled in the Senate, the reason they are having to resort to these complex maneuvers, is because the pushback is working. The phone calls to representatives, the public outcry, the independent journalism, the no from the states. It is jamming the gears. Democracy isn't supposed to be polite. It isn't supposed to be a quiet room where experts decide your fate. It is supposed to be a loud, messy, argumentative struggle for what is right. And right now, the struggle is alive. The Senate Democrats floating these changes didn't expect you to notice. They didn't expect people to read the fine print about warrants and detention caps. But you did. We did. So what happens next? In the coming days, you are going to see headlines about a deal being reached. You're going to hear words like compromise and bipartisan framework. Do not just read the headline. Watch the fine print. Look for the warrant limits. Look for the detention caps. Look for the funding that goes to processing instead of enforcement. If those things are in the bill, then the DHS hasn't been funded, it has been transformed. We are entering a period of history where the rules are being rewritten in real time. The question is, who holds the pen? Is it the lobbyists and the strategists in D.C.? Or is it the reality on the ground? This shutdown stalemate is just one battle in a much longer war for the integrity of this nation. And you are now on the front lines of the information war. If this video helped you see through the noise, do me a favor. First, hit that subscribe button. The algorithm hates this kind of content because it challenges the official narrative. We need your help to break through. Second, drop a comment below. I want to know, do you trust the states to handle the border if the feds step back? Or does that lead to a civil war? Let's talk about it. And finally, share this. Send it to the friend who only watches the nightly news. Wake them up. The Senate moves slow, but the truth moves fast. Stay curious. Stay skeptical. And most importantly, stay free. I'll see you in the next one.